Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're embarking on an evidence-based investigation into a truly fascinating subject in South Asian history, and that is the true origins of the Tamil people. We are going to synthesize paleoanthropology, geology, and historical linguistics to uncover the authentic, scientifically verified timeline of the Tamil lineage. Here is our agenda. 1. The framework of ethnogenesis. 2. Tectonics versus Lemuria. 3. Post-glacial marine transgressions. 4. Linguistic and genetic roots. And 5. Evidence-driven scientific synthesis.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the framework of ethnogenesis. So what exactly does that mean? Well, ethnogenesis is essentially the multidisciplinary study of how a group of people and their language emerge. It's like a giant puzzle. To get the real picture, early hypotheses surrounding Dravidian origins have to be tested against hard empirical data. We're talking about population genetics, stratigraphic archaeology, and comparative linguistics all intersecting to give us the facts.
Moving on to Section 2, tectonics versus the Lemuria myth.
Now, we have to ask ourselves a fundamental question here. Is a completely submerged continent in the Indian Ocean even geologically possible? Posing this question directly frames the core conflict we're dealing with today, the popular Kumari Kandam myth versus actual geological reality. You know, back in 1864, a zoologist named Philip Schleter hypothesized something called Lemuria. He thought there was a sunken land bridge to explain why we find lemur fossils in both India and Madagascar. It made sense at the time. However, in 1915, Alfred Wegener proved the theory of plate tectonics, showing us that continents drift laterally across the globe. They don't just sink into the ocean.
Here's the geological reality. Earth's crust actually consists of 16 massive tectonic plates, and they rest on a magma mantle that's 2,900 kilometers thick. Convection currents cause these plates to shift, collide, and fracture over time. But because continental rock is highly buoyant, continents drift. They absolutely do not sink. If we rewind the clock 300 million years ago, the Pangaea supercontinent dominated the globe. By about 200 million years ago, Gondwana land began to fracture, which, by the way, perfectly explains those shared fossil records Sclater was looking at. Fast forward, and the Indian plate is racing northward, eventually colliding with Asia 50 million years ago. And when I say racing, I mean it was drifting at a staggering 20 centimeters per year, which is lightning fast in geological terms. The Indian plate violently subducted under Asia, pushing the land upward to form the Himalayas. This tectonic reality literally pushes marine fossils to mountain peaks. It completely negates any theory of sinking landmasses. Which brings us to Section 3, post-glacial marine transgressions. 200, I really want you to remember this massive data point. This represents the maximum kilometers of Indian coastal shelf that were actually submerged by end glacial sea level rises. So we're not talking about a lost sunken continent, but a very significant, very real loss of coastal land. Here's what happened. Between 16,000 and 6,000 years ago, melting ice caps caused global sea levels to rise dramatically. This led to severe, localized coastal inundations along southern India and Sri Lanka. Ancient coastal settlements were basically swallowed by the rising tides, and those populations were forced to pack up and migrate inland. You can imagine how traumatic those coastal floods were. They were etched deep into the cultural memory. Over millennia, these real events were poetically exaggerated, eventually contributing to the literary traditions of lost coastal lands that we see in classical Sangam literature. So real, documented climate change was essentially mythologized into the legend of Kumari Kandam. Let's pivot now to Section 4, linguistic and genetic roots. Tracking human migration gives us an incredible timeline to look at. Roughly 68,000 years ago, the out-of-Africa dispersal reached South Asia. In the subsequent millennia, the Proto-Dravidian language framework originated up in the Indus Valley. Later on, agricultural expansion drove those Dravidian languages southward across South India. Now, while specific intermediary dates are still debated, this sequence of ethnogenesis is biologically and linguistically verified. To prove this, we don't have to rely on fictionalized poetry. We rely on authentic primary evidence streams. We're looking at Tamil Brahmi epigraphy dating all the way back to the 7th century BCE, ancient punch-marked coinage, stratigraphic ceramic inscriptions, and expansive maritime trade networks. This is the hard empirical evidence that proves the deep antiquity of the Tamil people. Now, despite all this actual science, politically motivated narratives from the 1970s and 80s really championed the Lemuria myth out of an extreme linguistic pride. We have to impartially recognize that they substituted passionate fiction for evidence-based history, stubbornly perpetuating a myth despite an overwhelming contradictory scientific consensus.
And that leads us to our final section, evidence-driven scientific synthesis.
Our evidentiary funnel here is highly methodical. Step 1, we absolutely reject 19th century sunken continent myths. Step 2, we acknowledge the documented reality of end glacial coastal submergence. And step 3, we validate this immense antiquity via genetic haplogroups and historical linguistics.
Because ultimately, true historical reference demands that we align cultural pride with rigorous, peer-reviewed realities. Acknowledging the verified 68,000-year survival and evolution of these ancestors on the South Asian landmass is an absolute scientific marvel. The scientific truth is frankly far more magnificent than the myth. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If we bravely discard the myth of a lost, sunken world, how much more extraordinary is the scientifically verified, unbroken 68,000-year human journey that birthed the Tamil lineage? It is a resilient history that stands proudly on the foundation of empirical truth.